Hello, this is Tracy Kiernan from stepbysteppainting.net, and this acrylic painting tutorial will show you how to paint this desert night scene on an 11 by 14 inch canvas. I will be using acrylic paints, and all of the materials that I am using for this painting are listed in the description of this video tutorial. I'm going to go ahead and get started. So with this landscape painting, our horizon line is directly in the center of the canvas. The canvas is placed in a vertical formation, and I'm just going to take my T-square ruler and draw a horizontal line with a pencil across the center of the canvas. Next, I'm going to grab my 1-inch wash brush. You can use any large flat brush for this step, but we'll be filling up the sky, and this large 1-inch brush does the trick. If you want, you can use a 3/4 inch wash brush if you don't have the inch. And I'm going to load my palette with the colors Phthalo Blue and Titanium White. So it's a really dark, rich blue, and we're going to blend to a lighter blue. So we're going to go ahead and load our brush in some water and kind of tap that water out a bit. I'm not going to dry the water off all the way, so some of that water that's left on the bristles is going to distribute into my paint here as I load it with that Phthalo Blue. And I loaded the tip of my brush with that Phthalo Blue, and I'm going to start at the top and do left and right strokes. And I'm going to work my way down the canvas. So I'm going to continue to do left and right strokes with that Phthalo Blue. So I'm just taking my brush and gently going back and forth all the way across the canvas, using that full width of the brush to fill up that area with that dark blue. I'm going to go about halfway down until I am ready to start blending that white. If you feel your color isn't flowing all the way across the canvas like mine, adding a teeny bit of water sometimes helps to boost it a little bit, but try not to add too much water into your paint. You don't want it to be dripping down the canvas. And so I got to about the halfway point. I'm going to load my brush in the white. So I didn't rinse my brush off. I'm just going to grab a little chunk of white right there on the tip of my brush. I'm going to start kind of below that blue area and work this transition zone. So I call it the transition zone. It's the part where that dark blue starts blending into that lighter blue. So I'm just going to gently brush back and forth, left and right, letting that white gradually blend with the blue and just softly paint it up so the little bit of that white kind of blends up into the sky. But as we go down closer to that horizon line, we want that blue to get lighter and lighter as it goes down. So it's going to get lighter because we're adding more white to the brush. And just keep gently going back and forth. You don't want to over blend it because you don't want that whole sky area to end up being all the same color. So you just want to gently blend that white up into those darker areas. Grab a little bit more white right there on the tip. And this part right here above the horizon line, a lot of that's going to be covered by mountain, but that's okay. We're just going to go ahead and fill that in. It's a super bright area of the sky right there above the horizon line. So I'm just going to take that and fill it in all the way to that line. And if you slightly go under that line, that's okay. It doesn't have to be perfect because a lot of that is going to be covered by mountains and land, and that line isn't going to be perfectly straight anyway. So that's it for the sky part of this landscape. We're going to go ahead and rinse the brush, and we're going to add some brown to our palette because we'll be painting the ground of our desert next. This is burnt umber, and if you need to freshen up some titanium white, or if that too much blue is in that white, you can add some more white to your palette. So we're going to do the opposite of the sky. We're going to start at the bottom, and we're going to do dark brown, blending up into a lighter brown. So with the landscape paintings, we have that whole perspective thing going on where things in the distance are darker, things are lighter and closer to the horizon line. So we're going to have this brown blend to a lighter color as we work our way up. But right now I'm just getting all that brown on there on the bottom of the canvas. So left and right, same exact technique as we did with the sky. Getting to about the halfway point before we load the white onto the tip of our brush. So right there is about the halfway point. Loading that white, and I'm just gonna get that white to blend down into the brown. The only difference with this ground is it doesn't have to be as much of a gradient. We can have it kind of vary. We can have some parts further away that are darker and some, it doesn't have to be a perfect gradient. So you can kind of see that I'm purposefully varying this so it's kind of light, but then there's a darker streak up at the top, and that's okay. We don't want, we want it to look more like a landscape and not a gradient here. So I'm just applying that brown to this area, going left and right using the full width of the brush. Just try to keep the bottom more of that pure brown and not so much of the white. And I did go back over that bottom area a little bit more with some more layers of that darker brown just to make sure that bottom is nice and dark. But I'm just going to keep going up and until I hit the horizon line with the light brown. It doesn't have to be super, super light way in the distance. Remember, the setting of this is at night, so it would be a darker ground. It wouldn't be too bright of an area. And I'm just going to add some more brown to my palette, get that brown right there on the bottom, make sure it's nice and dark at the bottom, and then blend it up into the rest of the ground. This is one of those stretched canvases where I could paint the sides. I'm not demonstrating that in this video, but if you wanted to extend that color on the sides of the canvas, you can do that at this step, or you can wait till the end and go back and extend the colors, so it's up to you. So I'm going to get some more white right there on my palette. I'm going to get this white. So this area up here, it doesn't have to be super, super bright, but it is a lighter brown up here, way in the distance. If you look at the finished version, it's kind of a shadowy area because I paint mountains above the horizon line and I add a little bit more shadow in that area. So it's not super, super bright. This is a night scene. There's a full moon in the sky. So the moon is lighting up the scene and making some light on the cacti so we can see the ground, but kind of a whimsical scene too. So anyway, we are done, and you can see how there's kind of these streaks of brown in there. So that's what I meant about it doesn't have to be a perfect gradient. You can have some streaks of darker brown in that landscape. I'm going to go ahead, rinse this brush off, and I'm going to do a step. What I should have done this before the ground. Wasn't thinking, but we are going to do some splatter stars in the sky. You want to try to make it so those little dots don't hit the ground. So if you have a piece of paper, maybe you can kind of cover that area up or just be really careful. But I'm using the toothbrush technique with the stars. So I'm adding the white to the tip of my toothbrush. I usually just use my finger to apply it to the toothbrush and a little bit of water. Too much water and your splatters will be too wet and drippy. So you want to practice that before you get it on the canvas, but then when you feel comfortable, just go ahead and splatter your stars up in the sky. So we have a beautiful starry desert night sky going on here. The next thing I'm going to do is paint the mountains. So I'm going to load the color Mars Black onto my palette, and I'll be using a round brush for this. This is the number 8 round brush. I'm going to freshen up some titanium white there as well. There are 3 mountain ranges in this painting, and we have a lighter mountain way in the distance. That's what I'm going to start with. So I'm going to make a light brownish gray on my palette. A lot of white, teeny tiny bit of black, teeny tiny bit of brown. So it's kind of a brownish grayish color here. And we're going to start by painting or drawing with the brush the outline of our mountain range. So this is the furthest one, also the highest one, way in the distance. And I'm just going to paint like a wiggly line to represent that shape. And I'm going to go ahead and paint it in. I added a little bit more white to my brush there, just to lighten that up. Because we're going to get darker and darker with the other 2 mountain ranges. So this one's super light and bright, the one that's way in the distance. And I like how my color is not being consistent there. I didn't blend it all the way on the palette. I call it kind of swirly blend where I don't blend it all the way. And that gives you color variation when you add it to the canvas. And then I'm going to make a darker version of that color by adding some black into the color. This is our medium dark mountain, so it should not be super, super dark here. It should be like a medium gray. And I'm just going to pave my next mountain range in here. It's okay if you paint over the lighter mountain. Grabbing a little bit more white in there to lighten that up slightly. Might need a little bit more dark for more contrast. So sometimes you just have to play with the colors on your palette there. And just making my second mountain range. This one is right under that lighter one. And then for the bottom mountain range, that's going to be all black. So you can wipe your brush off here. You don't have to rinse it off all the way, but right at this point, it's super overloaded. So I didn't want white to intertwine with this dark, dark mountain range here. But this is my darker mountain range. And this is just the black. It's going to need a little bit of watering down for flow purposes with this Mars black. So adding a teeny bit of water right there to the brush is going to help that black to flow a little bit better. But you're just going to paint your darker mountain range, pave the way for this one, and I'm going to have this one go up over. See how it overlaps that one a little bit higher, so that's okay. You can make it higher than the one way in the distance if you want. So I'm just going to continue with that darker mountain, and it's blending a little bit with that gray, but that's okay. And it's okay if your line down here at the base of the mountain is not perfectly vertical. In fact, we're going to do some shadow thing here in a second to kind of make that darker mountain range kind of blend in with the rest of the landscape there. So what I'm going to do without rinsing my brush is grab a little bit of brown on my palette, teeny bit of water, a little bit of white to make kind of a lightish brownish gray color. Not as light as the mountain way in the distance, but kind of a medium color, kind of the same shade as that medium mountain range right there. And I'm just going to paint some left and right strokes right under the mountain, right under the base of the mountain, very, very loosely, not solid, almost dry brush style, although I did dip my brush in the water, so it's not exactly dry brush style, but very, very loosely, and it just kind of helps with the transition of that super dark mountain range into that lighter color of the landscape. Makes it look like there's some shadowy areas down there on the desert floor right underneath the mountains. Next, I'm going to rinse that brush off and dry it. I'm going to add a dry wash into our desert landscape. Originally, there was going to be a river in this painting, but I decided that there is no water in the desert, not very much, but there's a dry wash. So we have kind of a diagonal area that we're going to add to our landscape. Makes the land area look a little bit more interesting than just left and right solid brown colors. So I'm going to make a lighter version of that brown. So I'm mixing a little bit of white into the burnt umber, and I'm just going to use the tip of my brush to loosely make a diagonal line on the bottom. So it's going to have some perspective here, which means that it's going to be wide at the bottom and get narrow towards the back because it's further in the distance. So there's my wash area of that I painted in, and I'm just going to kind of loosely add some of these diagonal strokes using that 8 round brush very loosely. I'm not trying to cover all of that brown. I'm just taking that white brown color and kind of adding some loose strokes in that area, going diagonally in the direction of that wash. I'm going to add some more darker brown in there because it's a little bit too bright for my liking. So a little bit more of that darker brown, and I'm just doing very, very gentle left and right strokes with that darker brown. Just kind of blending that in, but I'm not going to blend it all the way to where it's a solid color. I'm just going to kind of let it have some texture in that area. Next, I'm going to take some of that brown and kind of add it to the area below, a little bit of texture, maybe some different texture in the ground in that area. So it picked up some of that lighter color that was on my brush too. I'm going to do a little bit above the wash there, so it just kind of helps with the transition of that texture from the wash and the rest of the ground. And then we are going to move on to the moon. I'll be demonstrating how I did this full moon next, and I used a circle to trace, and I'm just going to measure this for you. It's a 2.5-inch diameter circle, so this is a bottle of medium, a Liquitex medium that I had. So you can find any circle that's 2.5 inches wide, or pretty much relatively that size. It doesn't have to be that size. And I'm just going to place my circle where I would like my moon to be. Let me show you from this angle. So this is placed like this to where it's overlapping that mountain, so that moon is peeking up above those mountains. And I'm just going to take my pencil and I'm going to go ahead and draw my circle. Okay. So you have your circle drawn, and we're going to paint the moon next. So I'll be using a number 4 round brush for painting of the moon. I'm going to freshen up my titanium white. I'll be using Phthalo Blue. There's Phthalo Blue in this moon as well. So blue and white. Start with the white and the blue. So we're going to mix kind of a medium blue. So about equal parts white and probably 2 parts white, 1 part blue. So it's kind of a light to medium blue. And my darker part of the moon is on the bottom, right above the mountains. I'm going to start at the bottom, and I'm just doing these short little textured strokes with the round brush, using the tip of my brush, making short strokes. So these strokes are going kind of in different angled directions. And on the edge, because our moon is curved, so on the edges, our strokes are going to get it kind of curve and contour with that circle. And as I work my way up this moon, I'm going to gradually add some more white to the tip of my brush. Of course, there's still some blue on my brush, so it's going to pick up some of that bluish color in there. But I'm just going to keep gradually adding more and more white to the tip of my brush. And right there on the edges, you want to make sure that your strokes on the edges of that circle are going in a curved direction. The rest of these strokes are really kind of going in all different angles, X's. And I'm going to keep adding that white as I get to the circle. Try your best not to paint outside of the circle. That's why we drew that line with the pencil. So stay inside of the lines of your circle. At the very end of this, I'll be going back and outlining that circle with a white on the paintbrush with the white. And I'm just filling this in so you can see the texture just by doing those textured strokes. That's creating the texture of our moon. When you get to the outer part of your circle, you can have your strokes go in a curved direction, like you're painting a circle in. So right there on the edge, you want to make sure that you're actually painting the edge of the circle. So you can actually take that and outline the edge to the best as you can. I know, kind of a steady hand right there to try to make sure you stay inside that line, but just outlining the inner part of the circle, or just on that pencil line, so your pencil line will sort of disappear. And then when I do these moons, I like to go back with this darker color, not too dark. If it's too dark, it's not going to work. A little bit more blue, and I'm just doing these jagged angular strokes with that darker blue to create more of that moon texture, that different craters and shaded areas that we have on the moon. And just by doing little angular strokes with that darker color. If you're feeling brave, you can even add a little bit of dark gray in there. It would create some different darker tones in that moon, but we're going to stay simple and just stick with that blue and the white. And then after that, I like to go back and outline that again. It creates some really pretty contrast, especially on the edges of that moon. So I just have white on the very, very tip of my brush, and I'm outlining that circle, trying not to deform my circle there, but just outlining that circle creates that extra pop of super bright white that's right there on the edge of your moon. Next, I'm going to add a few brighter stars in the sky by using my round brush and that white, and I'll also do a shooting star. So with these brighter stars, I'm just doing dots with that white, kind of adds some variety with those stars, and they're not all the splatters, there are a few of them that are painted with the brown brush. But with this shooting star, I'll make an extra super bright dot with that circle, and then wipe my brush off. So there's very little white on my brush, and do dry brush stroke to create the tail of that shooting star. So there's my little shooting star that's in our desert night sky. I'll be doing the clouds next. I'm going to go ahead and rinse my round brush off and set it to the side. I have a liking of doing clouds with this small flat brush. It's a bright brush. I think it's about a 1/4 inch wide bright brush. So if you have a cloud brush you like to use that one. I'm drawn to using this short bright brush for the clouds. But I'm going to go ahead and mix a dark bluish gray on my palette. With these clouds, I do them in layers and I do them dry brush style. So have a towel handy to wipe off your brush for when you load it, because you don't want a lot of paint on your brush. Too much paint and things just get really crazy really fast. So use the tip of your brush and paint in circular direction, adding a little bit more white in there because it's a little bit too dark for what I wanted to start with. But paint in a circular direction to form the shape of your cloud. So there's just paint on the tip. I'm painting in circles. I'm allowing that cloud to create a shape. So kind of a flat shaped cloud with kind of a bumpy bottom, the curvy top. And I'm going to just create a few more in the sky. The ones higher up in the sky are going to be slightly larger, and the ones lower are going to be slightly smaller. And I'm just doing this circular stroke to create the shape. There's not a lot of paint on my brush, so I got to work hard. I'm pressing really hard to get that paint to work there, but it's dry. It's not super thick. It's not spreading super fast, and I'm kind of very loosely painting the shapes of those clouds. Then here's my second layer. So like I said, I do these in layers. I grabbed a little bit of white, wiped my brush off, and now here we go. This is going to be my second layer, but I'm not going to be covering up all of that darker first layer. The moon would be hitting the clouds on the bottom and on the right side of the clouds, so that's where I'm adding this lighter color towards the bottom of the clouds. And I'm painting circular strokes, kind of blending with that gray. That darker gray is still wet, not dry all the way. And again, loading the white on the tip of the brush, grabbing your towel, wiping it off, and then go in and do your next layer. So see how that's much, much lighter. Just be really careful. If it's super, super bright, you want to go and wipe off more paint off of that brush. You don't want it to be taking over, and it shouldn't be thick at all. So actually right there, I wiped off all the paint off my brush real quick, and that helps to blend your colors together. So if it looks like it's not blending very well, you can wipe off your brush all the way, and then you can just use that dry brush to blend your clouds. So I'm just kind of creating a few little cloud marks kind of around those other clouds, some stray clouds up there. And I'm just going to do another layer with some more of that brighter white color. So loading the white, wiping off the brush. I'm going to have this overlap our moon here a little bit. Just adding a few more marks of that white color, but it's not super bright white. I'm going to be real careful here with these clouds that are overlapping the moon. I want some contrast, so I'm grabbing a little bit more of that gray color. I'm just going to gently have it slightly overlap that moon, but I don't want to take away too much from that moon. So just a few little drifters going over that moon. And then sometimes it just kind of helps to take your finger and you can use that to sort of blend that. Try not to over blend. Or you can use your brush dried off with the towel, and use the dry brush to blend your colors in the clouds. So there's our cloud step, and we're gonna go and do pretty much the main focus of this painting are these beautiful cacti, saguaro and prickly pear in our painting. So I'm going to go ahead and start with our large saguaro cactus that's in the lower left part of the painting. And the color I used for that is Hooker's Green Hue Permanent and titanium white. So freshen your titanium white if you need to. Use a number 8 round brush. Add a little bit of white to your green to lighten it up. And we're going to just use our brush to draw out our cactus shape. So this is a vertical shape, and I'm just using my brush to lightly make the line. And this is a very, very tall cactus. Well, it is in the front of our painting, so I know that got cut up there at the top, but you'll see it here just a second. But our cactus is actually slightly wider on the bottom, slightly thinner at the top, so it gets kind of more narrower at the top. And I'm going to fill it in with more of that Hooker's green. So I have that white and the green kind of blending it together, or that white, not that white, but that light green and that darker green are kind of blending together on the canvas. But you want to make sure that you're painting in a vertical direction. And you just want a nice solid coat of that green on that shape. So super easy. And then we'll be doing the arms, and the saguaro cactus arms are thinner and they get thicker. So I used my brush. I started out by doing the tip of my brush with a lighter stroke, and then I pressed harder on my brush to create the thicker part of the cactus arm. So you can try that as well, or you can kind of outline the outer part of it and fill it in. But you can see how the base of the arm is a lot thinner than the top part of the arm. So it gets more rounded and wider on the top part of it. And then I like to grab a little bit of white on there, gives my cactus some more depth in there where that moon would be hitting the side of it. So a little bit of white on your brush, blend it to the rest of the green and just on the right part of the arms, and it really gives it that sort of 3D effect already. So adding that white, blending it with the rest of the green, and I'm pretty much doing that to the base of the cactus as well. And then so this arm over here on the left, same thing. It starts out thinner and gets wider, but it kind of goes off the canvas, and we have the darker green sort of on the left of the arm. And then we can go back over the base of our arms with some more of that darker green. Next, I'm going to do the prickly pear cactus, and I'm going to add some yellow to my palette to kind of change this green up a little bit, so not everything is all the same shade of green here. But this is the cad yellow medium hue. I'm just going to mix it in with some of that darker green. Still a little bit of white on my brush as well. So white, green, yellow, creating the shape of that prickly pear cactus. So I'm just painted kind of an oval sort of teardrop shape right there on the bottom, and I'm doing these contouring curved strokes to fill in that cactus shape. And I'm going to purposefully not blend that color all the way together, so I want kind of those streaks still showing through with that yellow and that darker green still showing. Then I'm going to do the other arms of the prickly. So I'm just using my brush to paint the shape of that, and I'm going to fill it in solid. So there's one arm that's going this way, and then I'll do another one kind of going off this way. So you can have it's just a simple little oval line, and it's kind of more narrow at the base. And then I'm going to do another one kind of going off of that one. So smaller one, the prickly arms get smaller as they branch off. And it's okay if your greens kind of vary a bit. You can have fun with the colors on your palette. Grab some yellow, grab some white. That got a little bit too bright there. But I'm just doing some more strokes with the lighter color just to kind of make that green pop a little bit so it's not just a solid green. I'm adding some fun yellowish strokes in there. They're adding the little bits of lighter green and yellow on the edges or in the middle. Adds some interesting contrast to that color of the prickly pear. And then I'm going to go in and do some smaller cacti. So these ones are further in the distance. I'm going to do the same thing I did as that larger one, but make it smaller. So make our cactus base slightly wider at the bottom and it gets more narrow at the top. Same thing with the arms of the cactus. If you find this number 8 round brush to be too thick, you can switch to that smaller round brush. And I'll be switching to that smaller round brush here in just a bit because this big brush kind of gets too thick sometimes for these smaller areas. But I'm going to go in and make a different version of that green. So like I said, have fun with the colors on your palette when you're doing these landscape paintings. You could mix some white and yellow into your green. And that cactus is super bright. That moon must be hitting it, making it super bright. But I'll go back over that in a little bit. Go back over this one, add some more lighter streaks in there. So what I'm doing here in this step is painting saguaro cacti all over the desert landscape. And just keeping in mind that the ones that are way closer to that horizon line are much, much smaller and they're larger closer to the bottom of the painting. So just make as many, go crazy with it, make as many swirl cacti as you feel like painting. You could even, if you wanted to do some prickly pear, you can. I just stuck with the swirl. But just paint as many as you want. The ones that are way back here are very, very abstract and we don't really see much of their shape. You can even just do like a little vertical line for the ones that are way, way in the distance so we don't really see their full shape. Then at the bottom here, I'm going to do a yucca plant or agave plant. And so they're just these leaf shapes and they're all different shades of that green here and they just overlap each other. So grabbing different amounts of white and green and creating, you can even add a little bit of black in there if you want to do like a grayish green color. And you only need a little tiny bit of black to do that. And just making each leaf overlap each other and it forms that agave cactus shape. Next, I will show you how to paint a rock. So I'm gonna grab some, wipe my brush off, grab some black and white on my palette to make a medium gray color and just decide where you want your rock to be. So this rock is going to be right here next to that wash. A little bit bright at first, a little bit too much white there. So I'm going to wipe my brush off and grab more of the black there. So I guess that worked out, using the white first and then going back with that darker color. I'm just kind of making an abstract sort of rock shape here, not letting the colors blend all the way, so we have different variations of that gray in there. I add a little bit more white right there on the right side. Maybe the moon is hitting that rock and making it bright. And maybe we have some other smaller rocks on the left and right of the basin. And I'm not going to do too many rocks, just a few. And then while I have that darker gray color on my brush, I'm going to use that to create the shadow. So this really is effective. When you add that shadow in there, it really makes it look like that moon is reflecting on those cacti, casting the shadow on the ground, making it really pretty. But it is a dry brush style, so don't have a lot of paint on your brush when you do that gray shadow. So wipe off that paint off of your brush. That's a tip I can give to you. So you don't want it to be super thick. It's just a very thin dry brush stroke. The next thing I'm going to do is add the details to our cacti, starting with the prickly pear. And I'm going to do some fresh titanium white, rinse my 4-round brush off and dry it. I'm going to load white to the very tip of my brush, and I'm going to paint dots on the prickly pear. So just a little bit of white right there on the tip, and we're painting the dots to represent the pricklies of our prickly pear. So I'll just go in there, and they're kind of scattered, but more like a checkered board formation, I guess, or they're going diagonally from each other. Anyway, it's not just random dots, they're just kind of going diagonal from each other, if that makes sense. But I'm just adding those dots to each of the rounded part of the prickly pears. Then I'm going to load my palette with Quinacridone Magenta, and that's going to be the color I'll be using to paint the fruit of the prickly pear. So there's a little bit of white on my brush with that magenta, so it's making it a lighter version of that magenta as I paint it in. But I'm just doing little oval shapes on the edges of the prickly pear pieces. So we'll do 3 over here, and then we'll add another set on this one. And then we'll do a 3rd set over here. And if you want, you can add a little bit of white and add a little touch of highlight to the top part of each of the fruits. But when this dries, we'll go back and add little black dots on them, but let's let that dry first. I'm going to go ahead and do some blossoms on the saguaro cactus, so we're going to use the yellow for that. Mix a little bit of yellow into the white. Add it to the tip of the brush, and just at the very top of the arm, you're just going to drag your strokes upwards and kind of curved to create the blossom shape of the cactus. So these ones are much smaller because they're in the distance, so we would only just do a little dot, and maybe we wouldn't see the bloom on the cactus that is way, way far away. And then, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little bit of black line texture to this front cactus. I have a slightly watered down Mars Black, that 4-round brush, and I'm just loosely, look how I'm holding the brush, I'm holding the handle on towards the end, or the far end of it. That helps to get those loose strokes in, but that watered down black makes it very loose too. But just a few vertical lines to create some of that black line texture that we would see in this cactus that's closer to us. So it would have a little bit more detail to show off. This one, maybe there might be some line texture, but not as much. And you know what would be really cool is doing like an owl hole in this front cactus. I just thought of that. That would be a fun idea, but I didn't do that. Just an idea if you wanted to do that with a little owl sitting in the hole. But I'm also taking the black and adding it kind of in areas of the prickly pear towards the bottom, a little bit of shadowing in there, but not too much detail here. I'm going to go in and add a lighter green to some of my saguaros here in the background. So that lighter green, or that white mixed with the green right there, just right here, a little bit on the right, so the moon is hitting that a little bit brighter in that area. And I'm going to go and touch up my shadows as well. So watered down black, I just want to go in here and really define those shadow lines just a bit more, with a little bit of that black, but not too much. It needs to either be dry brush or watered down. It cannot be a thick, chunky stroke for those shadows. Then I'm going to add some lighter pink to the fruit of my prickly pear. I'm pretty much done with this painting. I'm just doing all these final little touch-ups to it. So I'm adding some lighter pink on the top here for highlight, and I'm blending it back down so it's not super bright. So you can play around with that white and the magenta to create different tints of it. Then I'm going to take my black and I'm going to, I know that pink is not dry, but I'm not being patient here with that. But I'm going to do little black dots on my prickly pear fruit. So just the black on the tip of the brush, little black dots. All these little details of this painting make the whole thing come together. This is the last step in this painting tutorial, so this painting is coming to its conclusion. I hope that you enjoyed watching me paint, and if you painted along with me, I hope that you enjoyed painting this beautiful desert night scene painting. I love desert paintings. It's one of my favorite subjects to paint. Anyway, thank you, my friends. Thanks for watching, and thanks for painting with me.